Our Foreign Affairs Minister saying this, Chrystia Freeland, quote, as the #1 customer of American steel, Canada would view any trade restrictions on Canadian steel and aluminum as absolutely unacceptable. The United States has a $2 billion surplus in steel trade with Canada. Canada buys more American steel than any other country in the world, accounting for 50% of U.S. exports. Chrystia Freeland trying to say Canadian government will not take this lying down. Marvin Ryder is standing by. He is with McMaster University's DeGroote School of Business, and he knows trade. He's coming to us today from Hamilton. So, do you think we will get an exemption, Marvin?
Yeah, so let me start off by saying it's unusual that a president talks about doing tariffs. That's not actually part of his job description. That's really what Congress does. But there is one exemption, and that is when you have national security issues. So this is the way Donald is framing this, that steel and aluminum are national security issues for the United States, and therefore they have to take these tariffs. Now, I think he's going after, as you suggested, China, possibly Russia, and even possibly Indian steel and aluminum makers, and therefore I think it's likely we're going to get an exemption. I'm buoyed by the fact that the Secretary of Defense, former General Mattis, has actually said he views Canadian steel and aluminum as a strategic asset of the armed forces in the United States. That's why I think we're likely going to get that exemption.
If we don't get an exemption, Marvin, then what? What impact will that have on our industries?
Well, first thing people need to remember, of course, is we don't pay a tariff. It's only the buyer who pays the tariff, but that, in essence, makes Canadian steel more expensive in the American market. And for steel specifically, we have a great market with the automobile makers. Same thing with aluminum. Automobile makers use it, but there are other can makers, et cetera, who use aluminum to make our products more expensive. That's a concern. Now, if they slap one on, I think we do what Mexico has already announced today. You put an embargo on us, we're going to put tariffs on you, tit for tat. I haven't seen a trade war like this since the 1960s break out. I hope Donald knows what he's doing.
Speaking of that, this notion of a trade war, what is the strategy on the part of the White House here? I mean, is there one?
Well, the second question is the better one. You know, Donald plays to his base. His base is the Rust Belt. We've got to make America strong again. We've got to protect those workers and try to bring those American jobs back. I think he falsely thinks that these tariffs are actually going to help. In fact, tariffs often make domestic companies less able to compete in international markets. It doesn't encourage efficiency. It doesn't encourage the kind of investments because it gives them a false sense of superiority in the marketplace. Also, because he's going to tax some of these things, if you need Canadian steel to do something, if you need Canadian aluminum, it makes it more expensive, and ultimately the consumer pays the cost of this, not the workers or the company back in the other country. There are other ways to do this, and I just think he's playing to his base. He's not setting good economic policy.
Well, speaking of that, and I want to get, the reaction that we heard from Chrystia Freeland, she saying this, we're the #1 customer of American steel, and this would be absolutely unacceptable if Canada gets punished here. And she goes on to say Canada buys more American steel than any other country in the world, accounting for 50% of U.S. exports. So I'm curious whether that ends up hurting, the American steel industry, bigger picture, Marvin, if Canada decides to retaliate.
No, exactly. So also remember that this is going on as round 7 of NAFTA is being discussed in Mexico City. That negotiation doesn't end until sometime next week. So this drama is playing out. I could, for instance, see somebody march out of those talks over this. I could see Canada put some retaliatory tariffs on American steel. You want to play tough, we'll play tough. Now, look, I don't want people to get ahead of themselves. The announcement today was about an announcement next week, and he promises the details next week. So I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I think we're going to be most favored nation status and therefore be exempt, and therefore we don't need to play the what-if scenarios. But if he wants a war, we're ready to give him one.
Marvin Ryder joining us from Hamilton. Always good to have you on the program, Marvin, and thanks for taking the time for CTV. As always, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Todd.